To most werewolf shifters, the mating ceremony is sacred. But for Lyra Wilder, standing in the center of the grand ballroom under the glare of 100 crystal chandeliers, it was a public execution. The silence in the room was deafening. The pack's elites, women in silk and men in tailored suits, had formed a circle around her. They held their champagne glasses like weapons, their eyes dripping with a mixture of pity and predatory amusement. Lyra stood perfectly still, her spine straight, though her hands trembled so violently she had to clench them into fists at her sides. She already knew what was coming. The whispers had been circulating for weeks since the pack doctors had leaked her medical records.
Let's stop pretending, Lyra. I cannot and will not mate with a wolfless reject.
Victor's voice echoed off the marble walls, sharp and cruel. The collective gasp from the crowd was purely performative. They had all been waiting for this. Lyra felt the blood drain from her face.
Victor,
we have been betrothed since childhood.
We made a promise to the elders.
Promises expire when the merchandise is defective. Look at you. You don't even have a wolf spirit. And worse, you're barren. Accept reality, Lyra. Without my protection, the pack will throw you to the rogues. Besides, I already have a new Luna. My sweet cousin here has pure blood. And more importantly, she's already carrying my pup.
The double devastation hit Lyra like a physical blow to the ribs. She couldn't breathe. Victor stepped closer, invading her space, his alpha pheromones deliberately flaring to suppress her, a suffocating wave of dominance meant to force her to her knees in front of the entire territory. But before Victor could utter another insult, the laws of physics inside the ballroom simply broke. The mocking laughter died in the crowd's throats. The temperature in the grand hall plummeted so rapidly that frost began to crawl up the edges of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The air was suddenly sucked from the room, leaving the guests gasping. The giant crystal chandeliers above them began to spark and hiss with violent electricity. Then came the scent. It wasn't a wolf's pheromone. It was a suffocating, terrifying wave of pure ozone, the sharp metallic tang you taste at the back of your throat a split second before a lethal lightning strike.
Victor.
The voice was incredibly soft, yet it vibrated through the floorboards and rattled the marrow in everyone's bones. From the shadows of the arched doorway stepped Caleb Sterling, the billionaire apex predator, the most feared alpha on the eastern seaboard. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, but there was nothing civilized about the way the veins on his pale neck throbbed at a non-human frequency. In his right hand, he held a solid silver fountain pen. It didn't snap. Under his terrifying, silent grip, the thick silver simply warped, twisting and groaning into a mangled clump of metal.
Mr. Sterling, Alpha Caleb, I didn't realize you were attending tonight.
You were breathing too loudly. It disturbed me.
Caleb lifted his head. His eyes held absolutely no highlight, no anger. Just the dead, hollow stillness of a god looking at a slaughtered insect. He flicked 2 fingers. Before anyone could blink, his bodyguards materialized from the darkness, their hands clamping over Victor's mouth, dragging the thrashing, muffled alpha backward into the shadows of the corridor. Caleb didn't spare the bleeding man a single glance. Instead, he dragged his rumored crippled leg forward, stepping over the shattered glass, and walked directly toward the wolfless outcast. The crowd shrank back in absolute terror. Lyra expected to be crushed by his aura. But as he stopped inches from her, the violent ozone scent shifted. Beneath the storm, she smelled a hidden, agonizing pain. Caleb slowly raised a trembling, scarred hand. The fingers that had just crushed solid silver hovered in the air, shaking with a violent, desperate restraint, before gently, oh so gently, brushing a stray tear from her cheek.
Did he hurt your hand, Lyra?
What? No, I'm fine.
If any man ever stands that close to you again, drive a knife straight through his throat. I will handle the fallout. Come with me.
10 minutes later, the heavy, insulated door of a bulletproof V12 SUV slammed shut, sealing them inside. The silence in the cabin was thick, broken only by Caleb's slightly labored breathing.
Where are you taking me? You just humiliated the future alpha of my pack in front of the entire territory. They're going to hunt me down. And why me? You're Caleb Sterling. You could snap your fingers and have any perfect, pure-blooded alpha female in the country. I'm broken. I don't even have a wolf.
Caleb looked down at his black leather gloves. A bitter, self-deprecating chuckle escaped his throat. When he looked back up, the deadness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a raw, bleeding vulnerability.
Because the High Council demands I take a mate before my 30th birthday, or I lose my empire. And because, Lyra, because you are the only person in this entire city whose scent doesn't make me want to rip my own skin off. Sat in the contract, marry me. And I promise you, Victor and your wretched family will spend the rest of their miserable lives looking up at you from the dirt.
Life in the Sterling estate was a gilded cage of absolute silence. Following the signing of their contract, Caleb gave Lyra everything a Luna could desire, dripping her in diamonds, securing her pack's borders, and obliterating her enemies. But in private, he was a ghost. They slept in separate wings. She was explicitly forbidden from ever approaching his private study. Until the night of the full moon, Lyra was ripped from sleep by a sound that made the blood in her veins run cold. It wasn't a shout. It was a guttural, agonizing, tearing noise, the unmistakable sound of bone cracking and reshaping under immense, invisible pressure. It came from the West Wing. She didn't run away. She followed her instincts, walking barefoot down the long, shadowed corridors until she reached the heavy oak doors of his forbidden quarters. The air in the hallway had grown unnaturally heavy. Frost was literally creeping up the edges of the brass door handle. She pushed it open. There were no lights. The temperature inside was like a meat freezer, the air so bitterly cold she could see her own breath pluming in the dark. And on the marble floor, curled in the shadows, was the apex predator of the eastern seaboard. Caleb was convulsing. His usually pristine skin was marred by jagged black veins of dark magic crawling up his throat. When he lifted his head, his brilliant blue irises were splintering with microscopic cracks, like glass shattering under the pressure of the deep ocean. The curse had taken hold.
Get out!
His voice was a feral, unrecognizable rasp. The ancient curse in his blood dictated that the touch of any living creature would cause him to spontaneously combust in agony. He was a god, trapped in a cage of his own decaying flesh.
Leave, Lyra. I will tear you apart.
You're lying! You can barely breathe!
Lyra possessed a terrifying, self-destructive courage. She knew she was a defective, wolfless reject, but she also knew a dying animal when she saw one. Ignoring his lethal warnings, she dropped to her knees on the freezing marble, reaching out and pulled the trembling billionaire fiercely into her arms.
Don't. It burns.
But the burning never came. The moment her ordinary human-like scent wrapped around him, the black veins on his neck halted in their tracks. The splintering in his eyes stopped. Her defective, wolfless blood was the ultimate, impossible sedative to his ancient curse.
How are you doing this?
Caleb's massive hands, which only yesterday had crushed solid silver into dust, came up to grip her waist with desperate, trembling reverence. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent like a drowning man breaking the surface of the water.
Don't go. Please, Lyra. Just let me hold you.
And there, in the pitch-black, freezing room, the power dynamic of their world shattered entirely. The billionaire king had surrendered his crown and placed his life entirely in the hands of a broken girl. The High Council's winter gala was a suffocating display of wealth and predators. For Lyra, it was a minefield. It had been exactly 3 days since she found her billionaire husband writhing on the freezing marble of his private quarters. 3 days since she realized Caleb Sterling wasn't a god at all, but a cursed, dying man who was biologically addicted to her scent. Tonight, he had left her side for barely 5 minutes to speak with the territory elders. 5 minutes. That was all the time Victor needed to corner her in the dimly lit corridor outside the cloakroom. Her ex-fiancé didn't just approach her. He stalked into her space, deliberately flaring his alpha pheromones. It was a crude, biological attempt to force a wolfless female to submit.
You actually think he wants you, don't you? Look at you, Lyra. Draped in sterling diamonds, pretending you belong among the elites. We all know he just needed a placeholder to satisfy the council.
Step back, Victor, or I'll have security drag you out by your teeth.
Security? You think they listen to a Barren reject? You're a joke. A defective toy he'll throw away the second he finds a real Luna to breed.
Victor's sentence died in his throat. He didn't stop speaking by choice. He stopped because the physical laws of the corridor simply collapsed. The ambient chatter from the ballroom faded into a ringing, dead silence. The crystal glasses resting on a nearby serving tray began to vibrate, then shattered entirely, raining fine dust onto the carpet. The temperature plummeted so fast that Lyra could see her own breath. The air grew thick, viscous, reeking of scorched earth and violent thunderstorms. Victor began to choke, his hands flying to his throat as if an invisible vice had just clamped around his windpipe. At the far end of the corridor, stepping out of the shadows, was Caleb.
Take another breath.
The voice was barely a rasp, stripped of all humanity. Caleb didn't walk, he blurred. In a fraction of a second, the billionaire crossed 30 feet of hallway. He didn't punch Victor. He simply wrapped his massive, scarred hand around the alpha's throat and slammed him backward into the mahogany-paneled wall. The wood splintered with a sickening, violent crack.
Breathe her air again, and I will rip your spine through your chest.
Victor's eyes rolled back, his feet dangling inches off the floor as Caleb's grip tightened. But Lyra wasn't looking at Victor. She was looking at Caleb's neck. Beneath his pristine white collar, thick black veins of dark magic were violently pulsing. The sheer physical exertion of his rage was triggering the curse. He was burning alive from the inside out, and he was doing it just to punish the man who insulted her.
Caleb, drop him! You're bleeding!
It was the only command that could have reached him. Caleb tossed the unconscious Alpha to the floor like a sack of broken meat. The monster turned around. His chest heaved, the fabric of his suit straining as he fought for oxygen. His brilliant blue eyes were fractured, shattered like broken glass, swimming with absolute feral panic. He stumbled toward Lyra, the apex predator entirely gone, leaving only a desperate, dying man. He didn't care who was watching. He didn't care about the council. He fell to his knees right there in the hallway, wrapping his massive arms around her waist, and buried his face violently into the curve of her stomach. His whole body shuddered as he inhaled her scent, pulling the oxygen from her clothes, her skin, her very existence.
Don't let him touch you, please.
Lyra's hands shook as she buried her fingers into his dark hair. The black veins on his neck slowly began to recede under her touch. She looked down at the most feared man on the eastern seaboard, currently clinging to her like a lifeline in a storm. And for the first time, she realized she was exactly where she belonged.